what we're doing now is I am spinning or coarse spinning some raw fleece. It hasn't been washed onto my core. I've just sort of pulled it apart, and we're just going to show you the idea of, see, there's a big lump there. I'm just going to let it go on. We're not looking for particularly any smoothness here. This is just even letting those little tails stick out. The fiber itself, well, there's no term that you could use. It's not a woolen or a worsted method. So we're just pulling it on. Oh, look at that lovely bit. You really get to see some gorgeous little curly bits of the fleece and allow them to go on. My eyes are always in this section here, so I can work with these two fingers and the pinching and the holding with this thumb and finger as well. So, and meanwhile my core is sliding. I mean, I could wrap it over my fingers, but it's working pretty well now. Sliding through my hands as the tension takes it out of my hand. So just pull there. Every now and again I might pull the fibers down with this finger and thumb. Just pull them down and reorganize them the way that I want. Woo! A little bit of vegetable matter there. We might say no to that. Okay, so here we have an opportunity to add in an add-in. Now this is actually some art yarn that I've spun previously, and I was just saying to Ivy, I haven't got enough of it for a project, so I'm just going to add it in and add it in as part of an add-in. Now this could be a piece of fabric, a long strip of fabric. Quite easily incorporates, you know, if you've got some lovely silk or even some linen, can look really lovely. Could cut it on the bias if you wanted to. You can experiment all different ways. So what we will do is, I'll just slow down my tension a little bit, and I'm going to just pull out some fibers so that I've got a finer group of fibers to work with coming away. And I'm going to take the end, this is quite a long one, but why not? I'm going to take the end of my add-in and just place it on the core and attach it to the core with a couple of rotations. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up the add-in and loop it over my thumb. Here's my core, and I've just looped it up over my thumb. And what I'm then going to do with these fine fibers is I'm just going to do another rotation. And what that does is it locks that down onto the core. I'm then going to bring up another and another loop, and each time with that loop I'm just going to allow the fibers to wrap it onto the core so it's nice and attached. Bring it up again, wrap it onto the core, and why not bring up a big loop and then a smaller loop. You get into quite a rhythm with it, and it starts to look, reminds me of one of those crispy potato curls at the fun fair, you know, that you get, the deep fried crispy potato curls. So we're going to bring up another loop. Oh look, there's a nice yellow bit there. Oh, and here comes up some lovely silk. But you could do this with silk fabric. You can do all sorts of things with this method. and you get some lovely texture. Here's still the finer thread wrapping it round onto the core, so we'll just keep going. Now you could say to me, well, why don't you just let it wrap around? Because if you do that, then it actually isn't attached to the core and it tends to slide up and down. This way it's actually attached to the core, and you can't really separate it either. It's nice and solid, okay? And it's really stable. Bring up another piece. Love these yarns that have the mohair locks in them, because that can look really quite interesting. Whoops, wrong way. Oh, and I obviously just there lost, this is a good idea to show you, I lost my yarn that I was wrapping with, or my fibre that I was wrapping with. Here's the end of that. So I'll just reattach and pull out my add-in, do a couple of wraps. There we go, and now I've reattached. Just bringing it up each time. And now just got this, it's a shame that that's lovely silky bit is the short end, or is the end, but never mind, we will then just wrap and start to do that really textured core spin again. So look how much we've got there. That's just going to be lovely. And once it's off the bobbin, and once it's on a skein and it's washed, and it will relax a little bit more, and you could well get some more openness there, but I'm really quite happy with that. So I'd like to show you how to do these little ragged sort of pom-poms, and this isn't, I was just saying to Ivy, this isn't the best example of these little pom-poms, but it's what we've got at the moment, and be able to show you when this yarn is finished what they look like, and how to attach these little pom-poms onto the yarn itself. So this is actually made out of singles. So quite often we get these balls of singles. Here's some with, you know, basically in a colour. This one is just in a natural fleece. And you just take them off your bobbins because it's what's left over on plying. So all I'm going to do is I've determined that I quite like this length of pom-pom, and remember it's a single, so once it's washed it'll all twist back on itself, and you can just make them as thick or well, give them a fair amount of wraps, experiment maybe and find out how your single reacts best. So here's the wraps of my single. Now what I'm going to do with the core, so this core is still attached to my Hotch Potch, I'm going to determine the space and just push it through the wrap of my single that I've wrapped around my fingers here. So here's the loop, and here is the other part of the core coming out. Now what I'm going to do is to just take that loop and pass it over the top of my single little wrap here, and I'm just then going to give it a pull. So what I've basically done by doing that is I've completely attached it onto my core, and I can, you know, snip the ends off if I want to, but when this is washed, of course, it's the energy is going to probably all wrap back on itself. In fact, Really quite like the way it is just like that. And you get these lovely interesting little pom-poms. So you would do that for however many times you want, and then you basically start to Hotch Potch down to them. Just grab some more lace here. So you'd Hotch Potch or coarse spin down to it, just in your usual manner. Have a look maybe where the ends are. If you want to, you can incorporate the ends into the coarse spinning of your fibre, so that's nice and tidy. As you come down to it, just basically wrap right up to it and then go beyond it. We'll just take the other end, whoops, and give it a little push and make sure that it's completely coarse spun. And so there you have, as I say, once we wash this will all, you can open it all up and you will get a really lovely sort of shaggy looking appearance to your yarn. Now you can make them as long as you want, and of course you can make them out of balanced yarn, plied yarn. They will hang like tassels off your yarn if you do them in that manner, and I can show you some of those. So coarse spinning right up to it and then wrapping around it. Might even take it back over. There we go. And continue to spin. Now come down to the other one that I've got. Needs some more fleece. Loving this fleece actually. We were just saying before we like the nature of it. Little curly cues. And here we go. We're coming down to this section where and I've got a long tail there sticking out, but that's okay. We can just wrap over that. Coming down to it. The interesting part about this is that they're both greasy. Fibre I'm wrapping around and the little, let's just give it a wrap back up there and around. Here we go. And so you will just get these almost like ragged daisies looking, which we had on the other side. So that can look really interesting, especially in weaving, although you will always, even with your knitting, you'd be able to organize so that that came to the front of your work. Now with the longer ones, my suggestion to you is, you can make them more like a tassel, but if you're going to do that, add it in, it's the same process as you can see. You could possibly make it longer, and then you could even finish it off like a tassel, wrapping it around. And while it was damp, what I would suggest you do is that you can give this yarn a little bit of a tug and make sure it dries in more of a, an elegant sort of way. But you can use up all sorts of hand spun and all thicknesses of singles here to just create these little bits of interest in your Hotch Potch yarn. So we have just illustrated before doing these little, what will become a sort of little fluffy shaggy pom-pom in our Hotch Potch yarn. But you can also add any fabric strips that you have, and this was some silk organza that I had that I've cut into, just torn into strips because I quite like that sort of organic rough edge. You can, excuse me, you can cut them thinner than this if you wish to. But remember that you're going to wash your yarn. And so, especially with silk, it will probably soften up and become thinner looking anyway through the wash. So cutting the silk is not a bad idea. You can use stiff cotton, any sorts of fabrics. You could even use some t-shirt fabric if you wanted to. That would make some really interesting features in your yarn. So it's the same sort of process as we did with the handspun add-ins that we had. So what we're going to do is, I might just spin a little bit more Hotch Potch to have some distance between the last add-in and this one. There we go, and of course just reminding you that this is greasy fleece that I'm just allowing to wrap around. So I will take my fabric and lay it alongside my core like that, and I'm just going to basically attach it into the onto the core. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a little loop over my thumb and do one wrap, allow it to come around, and then another loop over my thumb, allow it to come around. Just draft that out a little finer. And of course it won't do that when you want it to. There we go. And just keep pushing the loops up, tightly up against the other one, and allowing your core to wrap around. So just continuously doing that. And you get this sort of ruched effect with your fabric. This is the great thing about having control of your treadling. And here's the end of the silk. So what I'm now going to do is to take some more fibre and continue my process of Hotch Potch. And so there I have this lovely sort of ruched effect of fabric added in to my yarn. And when that's washed, it actually sort of reminds me of almost like the bougainvillea that flowers that sort of, you don't have to make it as long as that. You can actually just do 2 or 3 and it really looks lovely. So we might just continue on a little longer and pop another one in just so that you get another idea of that. Taking up my tension there. Okay, and that's my core. And we'll just draft out the fibres a little finer. Take this onto the wheel a bit more. There we go. So we've got a finer lot of fibre. Once again, just take the fabric, lay it onto the core, trap it with the fibre, and then start the process of creating the little loops. So there's my first one. Here comes my second one. Here comes my third. There we go. It's almost like you're creating this little posy of loops. There we go. And just grabbing a little bit more fibre to finish off my Hotch Potch and to trap those loops into the to trap the fabric onto the core. And there you have it. Okay, so now we're going to do something which most of you will know about, is auto wrapping. But I just wanted you to be able to see that you can auto wrap with all sorts of things. This is just some woolen yarn that I found on a cone that really blends well with this colorway. It's got a couple of breaks in it, but that's okay. That will just add to the whole eclectic nature of this yarn. The nice thing about Hotch Potch yarn is that you just don't have to have any rules. You make up your own rules. I might auto wrap for a small section and then I might give it up and go and do something else, and we'll show you some examples of finished items that we've made out of the Hotch Potch yarn. But it's just using up your stash, basically using what you've got, being a little creative, and realizing that you're the master or mistress of your own destiny. You can do whatever you want with this yarn. Okay, so we will incorporate the auto wrap in this. We're just going to pop it down on the floor alongside, in this case, the core as well. So it's getting a bit cluttered down there, but here we go. And I've just laid the auto wrap for a short period next to my core. And then I just start the process. Now we just might even catch the auto wrap in my middle finger, as you can see, so that actually guides it. And I'm still concentrating on what I'm drafting out. So having done that, I think it's actually going to be better and work better if it's over this side in that way. And we'll start again. Here we go. So just allowing the auto wrap to be guided through these fingers here. And obviously with auto wrap, it loves thin spots. It will, rotate and fill up thin spots, and it just travels along with your fingers. Having it through your finger like this stops it getting caught up in the pigtail orifice. And this way, you know that it's traveling down and around the yarn as you spin. So there you go. That's going to blend in very nicely with this mixture of colours, and it'll come more into the fore once we're going to wash it. Just fluff that out, and we come to the break. So I might just tuck that back in now and wrap it in. I might do a little bit of spinning with just my fibre, my mixed fibre, and then I'll add the auto wrap in at some other point. Okay, so I have some Hotch Potch yarn, just plain natural coloured fleece that it's actually washed, but it doesn't really matter whether it's washed or unwashed. The process is the same. It might just be that because this is washed, the process won't be as long as it would if there was some greasy fleece involved. So I've tied off this skein with the core, and of course it didn't quite meet at one point, so we've got a long piece of core here joining it. Now you can see that there's still some energy, it's soft energy, but there's still some energy in this skein. The idea is now that we're going to felt it, just gently felt it, not a great deal. And we'll put some detergent in the water. This is very hot water, straight from the tap. Yep, that's hot. And just add that detergent in, just so that there's a little bit of a slip in the water. And now we'll start to pop it in there. And we're going to be quite, not vigorous, but it's not as if it's as gentle as if you were washing a normal skein. Now if you also notice that I'm dropping the skein in, and as it drops down it's actually dropping on top of each other. We'll rotate it and we'll start to have a look at this, and we'll just keep rotating it and dropping it like that. Every now and again I give it a good squeeze, and this is not a bad idea, especially if you've got some greasy fleece in it. This is already starting to felt, I can see. And you can test it by pulling it and no, maybe a little bit more. Now the level of felting that you want to do can really depend on your project. I mean, this yarn makes wonderful cushion, the fronts of cushion covers, very sort of a little bit different, knitted on big needles. But if it was to be the front of a cushion cover, you would felt it a little bit more rather than gently felt it. But if it was going to be, say, for a throw rug, you might not felt it quite as much. If it's for a wall hanging, then you would take that into consideration and you might felt it a little bit more. Here we go. So I can't separate and see the core here. And when I pull, there's definitely a web. So I'm going to just give it 1 or 2 more zhuzhes up and down. Maybe put a bit too much detergent in here. It's a very concentrated detergent, but never mind. We'll get rid of that soon. Okay, so I'll just get rid of this now. So rather than get all the bubbles out, what I'm actually going to do now is start to rinse my Hotch Potch. And yes, I'm rinsing it under a cold tap, and I'm rinsing it under flowing water. So it's definitely the yarn of differences. You could, of course, just fill up a sink of cold water. I'm trying to get rid of my soaps here, and I wish I hadn't put so much in, but I did. There we go, and I can feel that it's... There we go. So let's have a look at it. So it doesn't felt together with this process. But it doesn't felt in smooth tubular thing. You still get the thick and thin sections as you were when you got when you spun it. So now what we're going to do is just, I could roll it up in a towel. I have been known to just put it in my front loader and spin it, because, you know, yes, it would add to a little bit more of the felting, but it really wouldn't hurt it in any way. And then I'll just hang it up to dry. And so we'll talk a little bit more about what I do with a Hotch Potch yarn after it's dried. So this is an example of some yarn that has been auto wrapped, and it's also being washed. So you can see now that you get this sort of lovely texture of the wool, commercial wool yarn having been wrapped around the Hotch Potch. And especially with the different fleeces that were added into this Hotch Potch, little curls have started to pop out in between the auto wrapping. So it really gives it a lovely sort of different texture to it. So when your yarn is dried, now's the time to have a look at it. And you know, there's several opportunities to tidy up a yarn if you want to, because let's face it, you've thrown in all your scraps here, and you might not like how they've behaved in the style of yarn that you've made. I'm not a big fan of this sort of fluffy part where the lock of the fleece hasn't been caught in, and so there you go, I will just trim that off. But there are certain other fluffy bits that I won't trim off, like I certainly wouldn't trim off these lovely curls, but I might just trim off that end little bit there, and therefore the curl sort of comes into its own. I might trim off that little bit there. This is a very different yarn. You can actually tidy it up as much as you want, or leave it as organic and as textured as you want. The more that you tidy up, the more that you will get a smooth sort of tubular formation to your yarn. But know that if something's sticking out and you don't like it, then just chop it off. And you'll find then that your Hotch Potch yarn will have this lovely appeal to it. I'm really enjoying the look of this auto wrapping on this yarn, especially as it presents itself across the long wool fleece that I put in there, the English Leicester, and the softer fibres that I had. I mean, I quite like that as a curl, so I'm going to leave that in. So it looks really, really lovely. Now the big question that whenever you do a yarn like this, people say to you, well, what are you going to do with it? And we have been known to just hang it up on the wall as is, and quite frankly, I enjoy looking at my yarn hanging on the wall and sort of stroking it as I go past. But I did want to show you live, so to speak, that how it can knit up. Now this particular yarn was quite thick, quite a thick Hotch Potch. There was a lot of white fleece in it, just some odd coloured bits that I had left over, and here it is knitted up. This was knitted up on 20mm needles, so quite large needles, just in a stocking stitch here. The bottom part of it was had no auto wrap in it. The top part actually had some, I did a little bit of auto wrapping on it, but it was a linen thread, and the linen thread has not actually felted, of course, into the yarn itself. So it sort of gives more of a wiggly texture, rather than, if you can imagine, this auto wrap would certainly, it's more embedded into the fibre itself, but that you can get some lovely results. Knitting up on a larger needle like this, it's still really lovely and malleable, soft, warm. I really love the pearl side as well. You know, there are some little curls, mohair curls sticking out. So you can do throw rugs out of this yarn. If you knitted it on, say, more of a 15mm needle and you're getting a firmer cloth out of it, you could use it as the front of cushion covers. I certainly wouldn't make a whole cushion cover out of it, but it makes a beautiful front face of a cushion cover for textiles, for home wares. You can certainly use it in weaving and the like for these lovely textured wall weavings that people are doing. So I'm hoping that you have gained some inspiration from this to use up your stash, just not to even think about whether fleece is clean or I should wash this or I haven't got enough of this. Just put everything into a big pile and just let the random nature of this yarn take hold and have some fun. So thank you so much for joining me.